they couldn't capture that bright infinity inside you.
Wow. Those are some deep seats.
Wow.
Trying to sit up a little
I
bit.
see some serious clock heads out here. This is fabulous. Like, if you're here, like, you are in this game. You are deeply committed because it is Thursday. And,
We're barely here, yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
we've been trapped in our houses for like 2 years. So I think Jen has inspired us, and we're gonna spice it up a little bit and take a little bit more risk
didn't
on
practice
this one
that.
and let it fly. This is gonna be a conversation. Might get a little messy, but it's gonna be good. So, who do we have here? Laura Richardson, most recently GC of Osso VR. I will say, probably one of the most mindful and insightful people I've been hanging out with lately. Like, gets real deep into the humanity of what we're up to. I've got Wendy Rubas, GC of VillageMD. Mad scientist. Like, we talked about some stuff. She's up to some crazy stuff. Just it's wild. And then fellow CLOC board member Aine Lyons, Senior Vice President, Deputy General Counsel, VMware. You got like all these responsibilities now. You got like global legal services, operations, privacy. Like, I don't know when you sleep, but Anya, straight up original gangster in this game. Like, been here, done the thing. I'm Jason. I work at Microsoft. I'm basically an innovation cheerleader. It's a fabulous job. So before we get into the conversation, we wanted to do a little bit of table setting, a little bit of reflection, and a little bit of projection so that we can bounce off some things. So the last 2 years, if we reflect on it, they've been this crazy experiment where we had these experiences that we had not had before. And we often focus on the disconnectedness. And we were actually talking about this backstage immediately before, and how hard it is to really create culture, cohesion, really just the esprit de corps that makes a team. And this is really rough because we simultaneously have to go do harder things. And without that connective tissue, it's really hard. But there's also been this other sneaky experiment that's been happening, which is, imagine if you could strip away many of the limitations on the amount of work people do. You literally allow them to stay in more or less the same place. You magically beam them into work. You strip away a whole bunch of the things that are limiting it. Imagine if you ran that experiment and it still wasn't enough. The business still wanted more. So you took your machine, you ran it as fast and as hard as you could, and they're like, yeah, but I need more. And that's what we're seeing. That's the experience that's happening on our team. So if that's true, then this is really interesting because, like, we know that we are going to have to adapt. Because if we ran that experiment and it was not adequate, like, clearly something serious has to change. So, but let's go deeper. Let's look forward. So as we look out on the horizon, we have conviction that demand for the things that our organizations do is going to keep increasing. And it's worse than that. The rate of increase is probably also increasing. So it's like this curve that's very ugly. We do not like it. So if that is happening, then literally we're in a place where we will have no choice but to transform. Incrementalism is probably not going to get it done. And it's interesting to examine why this is happening, to decompose like where all this demand is coming from. So there's a few kind of mega trends that we're seeing. So one is our enterprises are just generating more demand for the stuff we do because they are transforming how they do their business. And that's just pushing more and more demand for what we do across the boundary into us. We also see those businesses are out there and they're seeking growth opportunities. And it turns out that the best growth opportunities are often not in the simple places, they're in the complicated places. And so the work is getting harder. And then we also have these exogenous forces of regulation is increasing at this fabulous rate. But it's not just like a one-dimensional increase, right? You've got all these different jurisdictions layering in these industry and sector-focused constraints that are starting to sweep us in ways that we didn't expect. And the last thing I'll offer is, and we're experiencing this in our shop, that the process of getting incremental additional resources is getting way more complicated. Because it's not adequate to look at the business and say, wow, growing so much, and so legal should obviously grow in proportion. I think increasingly finance is asking for really hard-headed business cases that say, yeah, I understand your costs might be increasing, but like what is the thing that I as the enterprise am going to get for investing in you? You're a project like many others. And so I've got some great news. This is opportunity for y'all. These are problems that people with the skill sets that you bring can absolutely handle and make better. And so today, with that background, we're going to have a conversation with the tastemakers, with these progressive GCs who think about these kinds of problems. And we're going to try to unpack them and get into a little bit of where they go. And we are going to try to make this a conversation. So it may go nonlinear. Anya's the adult here. I'm basically the child. So she might have to rope me back in. But we're probably going to interrupt each other. We might disagree on some things. But that's the creative abrasion that produces our collective genius. And I think that's actually the spirit of CLOC. And that's one of the things that I've missed over the last couple of years is I can go in the halls and somebody will flag me down and be like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm doing this. I'm like, I think about it differently. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I should do it like you did. And in this week, I've had more of that beneficial kind of abrasion and like rubbing up against people than I've had on like these virtual calls over the last couple of years. So, Anya, given that you're the adult though, where should we get started?
I think maybe back to the future a little bit. You know, we've been through a really challenging time over the last 2 years, and what have we learned from it? Is there anything that we can take away as we go forward, just personally or professionally? I thought we might start there. So, Wendy, anything? Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think, you know, it sounds so basic. It's like, you know, back to the basics. But during this period, I grew my team from tiny, like basically me, to like 25.
Whoa.
Really,
We need Wendy's business case.
Whoa,
really tough.
one more time, please.
It's like 0 to 25 during COVID. So that's hard. And I think I think the learning for me is just the need for the humanity, how that's fuel. And so we started, like, you know, when you get on the calls, there's something about it. You don't talk. You just kind of like agenda-ize. And so you can work with people for a while, like have no idea like who they are. So we started doing like a party captain for our calls and just really making an effort, which is kind of like a lawyer thing, I guess, but we had to make an effort to just like talk and get to know each other. I just think there's such a hunger for that deeply. Even when I was here, I felt it, like when they said they were going to do the storytelling, I'm like, oh, I'm a lawyer, so I don't do that. I'm busy, I'm going to go. But there was like security people by the doors. I was like, I don't want to get in trouble, you know, so I just stayed. But it was like really deeply moving to me. And I just think that we're so in need of that right now. That, I guess, is what I learned.
Laura, any reflections? Anything you're going to take forward?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know where to begin because there was so much to learn from this time, personally, professionally, in every way, in relationships and otherwise. But I think for me, I think to some extent we all have a wish for a return to normalcy, right? We all, like, in some ways want to go back to how things were, and the truth is they're not that way anymore. Everything has changed. The way we interact, the way that we talk to each other, the way that we live, what we expect from our work has all changed. And so I think for me it's leaning into that and not trying to go backwards, not look for that normalcy that feels so good and comfortable, but be really open to the discomfort and saying, okay, so you know, the things that used to be like big benefits, right? Like working remotely or having flexibility for how you're scheduling your time, that used to be like, well, we're special because we give that to you, right? And that's not the case anymore. And so we can't kind of rely on those old things. We have to think much more kind of broader, like what can we give to people to convince them to be part of what we're doing together? And I think looking forward and thinking about that holistically rather than trying to return to something or pretend that, you know, you're offering something so unique with remote work, that's something I've really learned and have been delving into in myself. Like, what can we bring for people to want to be working together?
I got to interrupt. So that is transformational leadership. It really is, right? Like, so, you know, I think one of the things that I will admit that as an operations professional, I often get in my own way And I'm like, well, if I can just reduce this to the perfect process map, there's no perfect process map for humans, right? Like, we were talking about, like, we need to
Yeah.
engage in our humanity more.
That's
And
the worst part,
Yep.
yeah. If only there was.
if only there was.
Yeah.
It's not coming. But what you're doing is you're setting people up to go after those hardest challenges because they get to express their humanity, they get to connect, they feel like a team. And I don't think we focus enough on that. And I sure know there was no law school class that taught me
Right.
how to make that
Right.
happen. And so I'm curious, like, where are y'all drawing this from? Is this just from your own personal humanity? Is there a super secret GC club that you have like a handshake?
Yes,
Like,
super secret GC
Yeah, yeah.
club, but now that you know about it. Oh.
Yeah.
I think, and I can only speak for myself, but I think a modern GC has an obligation to look broadly, to not look at the legal department of the past, to not be insular, to think about trends broadly, and to incorporate things from other functions, other industries, like technology, right? I mean, we're here and so much of what we're talking about is legal technology enabling the scaling of legal departments, right? So I just have a broad focus and I don't narrowly focus and I think very deeply about, what's out there that's different, new, and could be incorporated into what I'm doing, whether that's from, celebrity gossip,
Yeah.
my secret little.
But you talked about the team being an organism, and I have a diverse team, and the richness of that, they will tell me, because I stopped doing the party captain, I felt sheepish about it sometimes, and they would tell me, like, that's, Wendy, that's really important. That's the only time all week that I feel like I'm a person. So the team itself, sort of, I guess, helps mold and shape some of that, I think.
But you had to listen.
That's not intuitive for sure. Yeah.
But the theme is people, right? I think, coming out of the last 2 years, the big thing for me was, the pause. It did give me an opportunity to pause and really question everything.
Yeah.
What kind of life do I want to live? What kind of leader do I want to be? And I think people are craving that personally and professionally and questioning everything. So I think you have to now make sure that people are really connected into the purpose of whatever it is you're driving as a team, that they feel excited about that, engaged.
That's
and
it,
they
yeah.
have to also feel like you see the whole person, because Zoom meant that it was no longer this veneer. We could see people's children, their dogs, their pets, like the lines between work and
Yeah.
people's personal lives are gone. So I think that connection, that clarity of purpose, that I don't want to lose our team are calling it now the power of the pause. We're just reflecting all the time so that we're not so reactive, that we're taking time in every meeting and every, time that we have to get together to really use it.
But you had to go first. You're the leader.
Yeah, and I think it's being vulnerable as well. We had a team meeting and I was really emotional and I found it hard to contain my emotions, and I was so embarrassed of not being sort of perfectly professional. But actually, I think people do need to see the safety, the psychological safety of it's okay to be struggling, and it's okay to know that some of the things we're facing are hard, and it's going to be an uncertain world as we go forward, and it's just how we adapt, how we support each other is the most important thing. Because we are in the people business. If you think of the legal industry, there's nothing else. There's tools, but if no one uses them or adopts them, it's really all back to, I think, people, culture, connection.
Yep.
At the end of the day.
Is it okay if I ask a question? I know I'm not.
No, you're not allowed.
Okay. I mean, I think this is a question for everybody. This has been a really challenging time. Like, who here has cried at work on a Zoom? Like, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's a part of this, right? To your point about being
I'm always very
vulnerable.
hungry afterwards, Laura.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
Toasted sandwich, I
Let's make
recommend.
it
I wanna-
hungry. I agree with the hungry.
Sorry, I cry on Teams.
Oh,
All right. Good.
okay, yeah, good. Let me broaden, yes. But that vulnerability and seeing into people's lives, it's so important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's mix it up a little bit. let's probe further ahead. So, as you're looking forward, and I think Wendy, I'm gonna harass you on this one.
Okay.
So buckle up. So, where is your business going? Like, how is it transforming? And how are you thinking about how your team needs to deliver impact in that new frame? Like, can you give me a sense of kind of the direction of travel of where you're taking your party bus?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot as, we've gone so deeply into legal ops, and that is so important and valuable. But I look across the company, and there's probably an HR ops people, and there's legal ops, and there's every department is now building their own little box of information and data. And if you look across the company, you think about it, you've got people typing in to their little box the same information, and we're all like somewhat not siloed, but we're still siloed. And even looking around here, we've got legal software that and that's great, and that's so much better than legal file cabinets for sure. But I've come to understand, I guess, that you really don't have legal information. You have company information, and the information has to come in and out of the department and into other places. And so I think that the next challenge for us and for the companies is, and it's a always a challenge and a hard one, is how do we start working together in a different way? How do we stop thinking legal ops, and how do we start thinking company success, And like I was joking with a couple, I have a couple great people here with me, I was like, you don't really get a prize for, the best legal department. And I'm like, well, you kind of do, and I hope we will. But that's not really the point. The CEO isn't like, well, it's a bad year financially, but thank God I have great legal ops. That's one good thing. It's like there's only so far that can take you. We exist to help the company, win. And so I think once we get all of our stuff in order, we've got to really think bigger. And our law firms have to help us. I hate to bring that word up, but.
Okay. Whoa, all right. I want to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Wendy. I mean, that is exactly, I think, where many of us, and particularly I think GCs have that view because they're sitting at the table with all the different business functions. We have to stop looking at legal as some island that we live on. We actually touch every part of the business. And so we have that really unique opportunity with operational excellence. As you said, Wendy, it's all across the enterprise. And if you can deliver something that taps into enterprise-wide impact, that's where your legal department becomes really relevant, really impactful, really valuable. And if you align to something that your CEO cares about, well, what the CEO cares about rarely gets cut on budget. So just being strategic also about that. We took the time over the last 2 years just as a company to completely rethink our objectives. And as the legal team, we then said, what are the 3 things we could do to impact our big drive to pivot from being an on-prem software company to a SaaS company? And we picked 3 things. One of them was simplifying our customer experience and to rapidly get them onto these terms. But that caught the attention of our CEO because that's what he cares about.
Yes.
And so,
people don't ask the legal department that, like, hey, and many times they know things, and they have, but they're just like, whatever reason, they don't like offer it. And if you go, hey, what do you think the company could do to be better? It's always surprising what they know and say.
And I loved what you said about the technology, really integrating all the technology across.
We're not used to these Britney Spears microphones.
No.
We're not.
We said we were going to
Lady
keep it very
Gaga
real.
would not make this mistake.
We're still
over in the park.
We're still learning Britney Spears.
But I think for all the legal vendors out there, just think about the fact that we have to integrate with enterprise systems and platforms. The data on its own in a silo is not impactful.
No.
So help us.
It's better than nothing. But
So there's a meta point that y'all hit pretty hard that I think we can't stress enough, which is you're operating like business people. You're really tying the work back into enterprise value. and you're not fixating on what is the legal issue. There is a business problem that has legal
Yeah.
aspects that you go and solve. And so Laura, I'm curious, like, what is your evolution on this kind of thinking been?
And I have to give a shout out to Intel, because this is where I kind of learned this behavior, right? Which is all about alignment with your business. And part of that is through, the lawyers there who support the businesses, they're really integrated into it. And so you start to be very cross-functional in how you are gathering information, right? And so I think to that point, it's really about aligning with the business, figuring out what they use, what they need, who they are, what their goals are, and then everything that you're doing, making sure that it very neatly fits with that. And so you're really driving in the same direction. And so they also understand how you understand their problems. You understand what they're using. You understand what their goals are, how they make money, and all those things. So I think the legal department, through how they acquire knowledge, can be so very aligned with their business, right? And then I think it's just that constant communication and curiosity and never letting that go, never assuming that your tools are keeping up with their tools or that your tools are working the way that you intended them to work. And so that feedback loop between you and the business that builds both the trust and the ability to have a greater impact, make things move faster, solve their actual problems, not the problems that you think that they have, right?
Yeah, that's hard because I do want to tell them what I think. I'm trying to get back to the listening. Yeah.
Another thing they don't teach in law school,
Not
listening.
really, no.
Yeah.
So you said a word that I love there, curiosity. I hypothesize that that is a fundamental skill for success where things are going. And it is not always something that is indoctrinated into our discipline, if we're honest. Like, let's just be real, because, it's just us. And I'm going to ask you we didn't talk about that. I'm curious, like, do you have thoughts on how we activate curiosity? And the answer may be no, but like, you seem to think about these things.
I do. I mean, I haven't thought specifically about that, but I can guess at how I would answer had I thought about it. I think it's giving opportunity for curiosity, right, and space for curiosity.
Yeah, I
so
agree with that.
if you're
Yep.
always reacting, if you are working 50, 60, 70-hour weeks, there's no space for that. So I think one of the biggest goals of legal technology, process, and systems is to automate as much as possible so that everybody in the legal department has enough time to schedule in and be curious, to be proactive, to think ahead. And that mental space, however you can carve it out and get it, I mean, that's when we are at our most impactful and our most, to one of the partners I used to work with said, there's nothing more dangerous than like a lawyer thinking, right? Our thinking is good dangerous, not most of the time. And so I do think one of the goals of every modern legal department, carve out space for thought.
I think what I receive from that is like, I need to make sure people have room to go play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like literally to go explore, turn over rocks, like not always with like a super crisp definition of what the solution will be or maybe even what the problem is.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I tell people, like, I remember when failure was shameful, but like failure's cool today, like just try some things, and one thing is I have a daughter who's creative, and so I've been observing her whole life, and what I've learned is like it comes sometimes in a burst, and it's not at the most convenient time, and if she doesn't follow it right then, it's gone, and she can't get it back. And so I do think there's some of that too. It's like sometimes something comes and you have to be able to go do it then and let it develop for you.
That is, I want to play with that because that's so great. And that goes, I think, back to that listening thing, right?
Yeah.
If someone on your team is telling you about something they're interested in, then helping them find the space.
That's where you have to follow.
Yeah.
Even if, so like, making space is important, but sometimes you have space, but nothing comes. When it does come, you don't have the time, but you have to just stop and let it come right then.
And I think part of our role is identifying when somebody's having that creative impulse and then helping them clear the space too.
Yeah. good, yeah.
Yeah.
This is like crazy human-centered legal operations stuff you're describing. This is
Yeah, well,
wild.
being a mother doesn't hurt, yeah,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
So you started opening the door on something that I want to go back to. So let's expand our gaze a little bit, and let's think about the problems that y'all have to solve looking down the road a piece. Are you getting the help that you want and that you need from our industry? Are the firms, the law companies, the technology firms, and you started touching on this, but I want to circle back on it. Like, are you getting that? What else could we do to help y'all be more successful?
Would you care to begin?
It's only because they all know what I'm
Yeah.
going to say. And it's my most controversial take. I have lots of thoughts on this across the board. I don't have enough time to share all of them, nor would you want to hear all of them because it's my soapbox. And I'm trying not to get on it too much right now. But I think one of the things that I have found particularly frustrating is how law firms have failed to adapt and failed to change at a pace keeping up with their clients, really. You know, we hire law firms. And
They're clapping.
I know, and I'm like, this is me being like, I will never be able to work in a law firm again after what I say. I accept that and acknowledge it. But
Not here anyway, mostly, yeah.
I think about this all the time. You know, there's like little incremental changes at law firms, but the impact is not seen. Whether it comes to diversity, inclusion, equity, how associates are treated, client services, the rates that they charge clients, the quality of those services. And there are individual law firm attorneys and even law firms that I think are fantastic legal minds, pragmatic, easy to work with, but on a whole, I do not think they have evolved, and I sometimes struggle with, can they evolve in the structure that they have, or do we just need to say, we're not going to work with law firms that use this structure anymore because this structure is broken? And I don't know.
Such a radical, yeah.
Yeah, such a radical.
Well, I will say that I would say it's top 5 like hardest things about my job is working with the law firms. I have found, as you said, there are places of excellence, and I did a presentation with Thompson Coburn, and I like to tell everyone, don't use them, they're terrible, because they're so good I don't want anyone to know. I was like, don't talk to them, because, because I like want to be the favorite client, but, so no on that. But there's, many times, like what I need, I actually know. And I'm not so much interested in what they are innovating, but the magic is if they can help me and work where I am. I have my system. If they would work in mine, or just believe me that that's important. I get a lot of, aren't you cute? Look how creative you are. It's not a compliment. You know what I mean? So, but that's a major stressor for sure.
Yeah.
Hardest part, yeah.
Well, and in terms of that, I think part of the reason that they struggle, and it's not their fault, right? The billable hour. It doesn't incentivize behavior that gets them closer to clients, that gets them
Yeah.
closer to the business that we're doing. And honestly, the billable hour to me is this crazy thing, and
Yep.
and prevents them again also from that creativity, the creativity that would help them be more of an integrated partner with the clients that they serve.
I think law firms really need to go faster. I think they have a moment now to try and, I think, transform. And they should listen to, I would just recommend, first of all, A Day in the Life of a GC, what it's really like. I'm not sure they fully understand
No.
the reality of that role and how challenging it is. And then also listen to ideas from all levels of their organization. I often see in a lot of law firms these amazing people coming through who aren't listened to. It's still quite hierarchical, and I think
Yeah.
like our teams, we've learned some of the best ideas come from all parts of our organizations, and if you're listening and you're willing to be open to embracing those ideas, those people can be really impactful in driving the change you need.
So true, yep.
And also, we've got to vote with our feet with law
That's
firms.
right.
We do have a lot of power and influence as well as an industry, and law firms will sometimes respond and say, well, we're not seeing that there's enough
They're still
market-setting
doing well.
conditions for
Yeah.
us to need to change as quickly as you tell us that we do. And so we need to create those conditions.
Yeah.
I think you're highlighting something that we can make better as a community, which is, so, Anya just flagged that we are not giving a clear view on success. We're kind of all over the place. And I'll speak for my own shame. So, if you look at the way that we buy and instruct outside counsel, we give a lot of discretion to the budget owner at the line level. And so we speak with so many different voices, and we're kind of incoherent. And so, candidly, I kind of feel for our outside counsel, because I have a feeling that we randomize them. And so I am starting to think through, how can our organization start providing the signal that you're describing with greater clarity? Because candidly, I think when I look at the experiences we're having, I think we're constantly undermining what you're describing.
But talking about clarity, I work in healthcare, and you can always learn things from other industries, right? So a doctor today, there's a number for everything that can be wrong with your body, and there's a code for everything you can do about it. And that just is imagine the data, we don't have that clarity to go, and if you can do that for the human body, literally there is a number that says you just ran into a pole. No kidding. There's a number that's and so you I got the wrong limb cut off on surgery. There's a number for that.
I want to test my understanding. So there's a standardized set of descriptors that encodes things that are done and are used consistently across many parts of an ecosystem.
2 codes. What's wrong and what are we going to do about it?
That's a novel idea.
Imagine
we could
if
never
we
do
had that. We have some codes for what do we do, but and there's some movement in what's wrong, but if we start to speak with a clear voice when we could see that. Now, it'd be imperfect like every model, but I would love it if we could start working that way.
So you might want some standardization.
But then we could compare.
Don't get Jason started. This is our hobby horse, Jason and I.
We don't,
We love standardization. But if the medical industry can do it, I mean, look at all the great minds in this room and all that energy and passion and all the different parts of the ecosystem that are represented. There's an opportunity right there.
Well, and the standardization leads to the automation, right, which leads to the space for creativity. And so then it's a great cycle.
That was good
A virtuous cycle. I like that. Oh, that's good.
Then we just need to solve the adoption issue. That old chestnut.
Yeah.
Well, so I think y'all started walking into an interesting part of the conversation, which is all 3 of y'all are clearly advancing these kinds of initiatives. And I'm curious, look, I embrace that all y'all are weirdos with your capabilities, but can you give us a little bit of a sense of the leadership skills that you think we need to start bringing forward if we're going to make these outcomes happen?
What do you think?
I think it's, we had a team meeting recently and we talked a lot about changing from this fixed mindset to this growth mindset and how hard that is, because many of us are trained in a way that, that fixed mindset is quite predictable, it's safe, and actually, I think we've learned a lot the last 2 years about adapting. We adapted very quickly when there was a big impetus to do so. And I think it's just to keep adapting, keep evolving our careers and all of our skill sets. There's just so much opportunity across the enterprise now. If you think of operationalizing ESG, privacy, operationalizing privacy by design, you look at cybersecurity. I mean, there's legal operations can go way beyond the scope and the influence that we have in companies right now. So just that curiosity of learning new skills. I loved the storytelling. That is so not what we would have ever thought even 4 or 5 years ago that we would have at a CLOC conference. And I think telling stories to the business about our impact, telling stories to each other about our lives, so we're more connected, we're more integrated, and that our cultures are better for driving change, and being more resilient, like supporting each other through the resiliency, because driving change is hard. It takes a lot out of you. So we have to really look after each other and the people that are on our teams that are doing that amazing work. So I think just investing in, it's the power of the pausing to take time to invest in ourselves, in our own skill sets, because we need that for the future. Everything around us is going to keep evolving, and we've got to keep pace with that too.
I think that is absolutely right, and I think when you have a growth mindset, when you're constantly evolving with the circumstances, right, you can change in ways that lift everybody up, right? And so I think very much about one skill that I've been trying to develop, and it goes into storytelling as well, is what's the vision for your team? What's the vision for your department, both in terms of how it interacts with the business, right? But also for the people who are within it, because it is a group of people. And so being very clear on your vision, being able to define it, and then being accountable for actually delivering on it is something I think is a great leadership skill, and everyone can practice, right? Because like visions can be nestled. They can be a whole set of visions together, and everyone is kind of accountable for their own that they are owning. So it's that accountability, vision setting, storytelling thing that you're talking about, because that's very important, but then also being flexible enough to know that over time, that story is going to have to change. You can't keep the same structure forever. It will not work.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think I've been thinking a lot about one of the other things happening that's changing is there used to be this feeling that you had to sort of conform, like if you were a woman that used to wear a tie, you know, and you were kind of like, you know, trying to be corporate, and people that had trauma, you know, it was so secret and so there's this new thing about just say it. And I don't know if that's a leadership skill, but I think that has changed. And, you know, I want people that would just say it. I don't want someone who's super gonna put it in some polish, you know. I think the risk-taking and the storytelling is part of just, you know, use your voice. I'm really trying to unlearn some of that. Thank you. Ooh, big claps for that.
I really think y'all have just given us a bit of a master class in really what leadership is going to look like going forward. And if you are a legal operations professional or leader who wants to expand your scope, who wants to grow your impact, we need these complementary capabilities to do those things. And I think we often fall back and we rest on a series of technical skills thinking, well, that will help bump me up to whatever that thing is. And what I'm hearing here is, yes, you have to have technical mastery, that is the table stakes. But what y'all are describing are really, how do you get people on board for a journey? How do you get them embracing change? How do you move them along? That's very powerful.
I really believe that this mindset, this operations mindset, is the future of the profession, and we're in a moment. And so I always try to encourage operators, my legal operators, just keep going. Just keep going. Listen, follow it, speak up, and it's changing slow and then fast.
And then for GCs, the other part of this equation, right? Like, get closer to operations. Be
preach, sister.
Collaborative with them. Yeah. Well, I think people want to act as though like they're
above it.
Hierarchy of it, but really it is flow, it is jazz, it is the combination of, you know, people coming with like legal expertise, that technical skill, but then how do you actually make that matter within an organization? That's operations, right? That's operations. And so that close collaborative relationship is so important, and I do feel like every GC should come to this conference, right? Because it's so much to learn here, so much to see and appreciate and be aspiring to for your company in the way that you really can scale and make what you are providing the most valuable to the company.
Yes.
Maybe that's our goal for next year. everybody bring a GC to this
Bring
conference
your
with you
GC.
so we can spread the word. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it's true. You know, when you take these jobs in operations, certainly when I started out, you really want to know the kind of GC that you're working with and whether or not they're going to really support you and elevate the role, because that's the key to your success. And it's certainly been a huge enabler for me, is having GCs who believed it was important but didn't just say that to me, made sure it was
Stand
evident.
up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and everybody here has the most power at this point, right? You know, you're valuable. There are opportunities out there. So if you're in a situation where your GC, your department isn't valuing you, like, know your own value and find a place where they will.
Just keep going.
Yeah, seriously. You
Keep
don't have to
going.
stay with that, and you shouldn't stay with it, right? I think loyalty is earned. It's not a given, and you don't have to stay anymore. I mean, that's one of the best things is because of the remote workforce.
Contact me, I need good people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, we're hiring. But you don't have to stay, and there's so many more opportunities, and honestly, like, look for the thing where you can make the impact, and that will, over time, I think, change people's minds, and they'll see from the lack of the people that they had before what they're missing out on, because you're great.
So rapid fire as we wrap up. Top tip, top sort of leadership learning that you could share with everybody. Jason, do you want to start?
I'm just going to steal that be curious line. Like, I'm just going to rip that off. Be curious, y'all. You're welcome.
That's good.
I love it.
Feedback is a gift. Don't use it as a weapon. That's my big thing.
That's so good.
Nice.
You guys are so good. I would say measure your work even if before they ask. By the time they ask, it's too late. So know the answer to that question and be ready to answer it even before they ask.
Yeah. I would say outlaw perfectionism so that people can embrace failure in a really safe way.
Yeah.
I'm still working on that one. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you. That's been a really, really fantastic conversation.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
hope
thank
you all
you.
enjoyed it.
Great.
Go this way.
So on behalf of the Board of Directors and the staff team, thank you all for being part of an amazing global institute. You all helped to make this a phenomenal event. Each of us plays a critical role in transforming the business and the practice of law. And now is our moment to use our collective power, influence, and ingenuity to be a force for good in the industry and in the world. It's been incredible spending time together over the last few days, and I hope you've all learned a lot, strengthened the existing relationships you had, and made some new meaningful ones for the future. So until we meet again, take care, safe travels home, and before you go, we have a few scenes that we wanted to share with you all to remember our time together. Thank you.
On behalf of the entire CLOC team, thank you for joining us for CGI 2022. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Safe travels.